podcast. I am going to have to ask for your forgiveness to start with because I have been ill and I'm mostly better now, but I still might be a bit sniffly and my voice is slightly rubbish. But finally feeling well enough to do a podcast, so yay! I have finished a couple of things that I have showed in previous episodes, so I'm going to show you those. And then, weirdly, I have no works in progress on the needles. Well, I have two, one of which I will be resuming and hopefully getting on with before the weather gets too warm. The other, today we're going to take a visit to the frog pond. So I will show you the things that I finished first. First up is very obviously this, which I'm incredibly pleased with because it is my Llif, which I can't not say Llif now like that. Llif! It's a super fun word to say, and yes, I need to remember what it actually means. It's Welsh. I think Welsh is a fascinating language and I'd like to know a bit more about it. Anyway, design is Llif, and it's by Teresa Schingler. If you saw the last episode, I was quite trepidatious about it. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to finish it because I was wildly ambitious with the amount and weight of yarn I had. So it is hand spun. It's yarn that I spun about a year ago. Back when the baby was very, very tiny and would just lie on the floor and I could do things. And so I made a sort of Aran weight, chunky 3-ply. It's naturally dyed. And so I've had to make some modifications. If you haven't seen previously, I did start it and I got up to about here before having to unravel it and start again, which was definitely the right choice. I'm really pleased that I did that. I always knew that this project was going to be a bit of a battle just because of yarn quantities. And I've had to make a couple of little compromises, which I wouldn't have made if the yarn weren't a problem. But overall, I'm really happy with it. So if I just show you, it sits quite nicely where my waistline is. It just overlaps a little, which I really like. And then, so I ended up reducing the number of stitches in the stockinette sections, which means that for my version, because it's in a slightly heavier yarn, and I've reduced the number of stitches like that, but only in the stockinette, it makes the cables a little bit more prominent, which I really enjoy. Watch you back as well. So you've got the cables running up the sides of the back like that. And yes, so I reduced the number of stitches in the stockinette section and just kind of fudged the decreases for the arm and neck shaping accordingly. I was sort of chatting with Teresa as I was doing all of this, and she was like, "You'll be able to work it out. It's fine," because it is fairly intuitive. It's a really, really nicely written pattern. I do highly recommend it. There are lots of, I don't know, it's just very nicely worked out. I think the shaping is really well thought out. I think I've said that before. And then, so I have made the armholes much closer and tighter than than specified in the pattern. So I actually worked a similar amount I was meant to for the fronts, but then for the back was very aware that I was going to run out. So what has happened is instead of the shoulder seam sitting on top of my shoulder, the front goes over a bit and along sort of the back shoulder a bit, which is actually really nice. I like it as a feature on commercial clothing. It's something you see quite a lot. And I think having it set, so if it's on the highest point of the shoulder, especially with a bulky seam, which this would be in this yarn, it can look a bit lumpy, but having it set back a little bit means it's not on the highest point of your shoulder, which I think works nicely. It does mean that the back neck dips a bit lower than it should, and that would have been compensated for by the ribbing, which I did not do much of at all. So in the pattern, there is a decent amount of 2x2 ribbing around the armholes and around the neck. I knew from the start, even if I had as much yarn as I needed, that I would do much narrower ribbing, so just a lot less of it, because I think it would look slightly sleeker, and I've got very narrow shoulders, and I think it would just work proportionally a bit better for me. So for the armholes, I'm quite pleased with them. With the neck, I would have liked to do a few more rounds, if I had the yarn. However, I didn't even have enough yarn, excuse me, to do that. I ended up finding a similar yarn in my stash, which is this one. Now it is some of the same wool, because this is left over from a project I did in Fernhill Farm wool. This, you can see, is quite a bit lighter, and it doesn't have the sort of pinky tones that are in this, because this is dyed. This is undyed. But it is a very similar weight, and it's 3-ply. Yes, it is. And it's sort of, it's just close enough. I don't think you can notice. So I use this for both seaming the shoulders, which you won't see at all, that's fine, and for picking up the stitches around the arms and neck. And around the arms, I picked up the stitches in that yarn and then did one round of the ribbing and then bound off in the same yarn as the rest. Around the neckline, I picked up the stitches and did the round of ribbing in that yarn, and then bound off using the yarn that I've used for the rest of it. Now, I was tempted just to bind off using that yarn, but it would be a lot more obvious having it on the edges. This way it's sort of buried in the gap between the little bit of ribbing and the main body of the garment. So it's fairly subtle. It means that I was able to finish the edges neatly, because that's all I wanted. I just wanted to be able to finish off the edges to make it look actually done. And I'm really pleased with it. I think it's very sweet. I think it fits me nicely. The sleeves, the armholes work nicely with the sleeves of my shirt. I think it fits very nicely. So yes, highly recommend that pattern. I'm going to be wearing this a lot. This is actually the first time I've worn it at all. It was drying on the radiator overnight. This is something that I am often struck by, the fact that you see lots of people blocking their knitted items on sort of pretty mats and using pins and getting everything all squared up and perfect. I'd say 80 to 90% of my knits get squeezed out in a towel and then slung over a radiator. And yeah, it works fine. Some things, if you've got a very drapey yarn, or if you've got lace that needs properly stretching out and things, fine, do it properly. But something like this, where it's heavy, bouncy, springy yarn, nothing's gonna happen to it. Sling it on something, it's fine. Very relaxed attitude to blocking. I love blocking. I really enjoy it. If you follow me on Instagram, you will see pretty much every time I finish an item, I immediately chuck it into soak, and I usually just do a little story video on that because it's just a really nice little ritual for when you finish something, and sometimes blocking makes a massive difference, sometimes it's quite subtle, but I just really enjoy how it takes something from being an item that you've just knitted to an actual garment or accessory. Sort of like pressing when you sew. If you don't press your seams, it's going to look rubbish. It's definitely going to look homemade. Whereas if you press your seams properly and, you know, have some sewing skills to go along with that, it immediately looks a lot more professional. Having said that, this is very, very definitely hand-spun yarn. I'm like the crunchiest, granola-est little woodland creature, and I love it. It's so cute. Yeah. So, highly recommend this pattern. Make sure you have enough yarn. Don't do what Marina does. Cool. Now, next thing, you'll see my slightly wacky hair. My hair's going to be not good for quite a long time yet. We're going to get there, but it's going to take a while. So in the meantime, I have made another Ramosa headband. This one is left over from, well, the yarn is left over from a teeny tiny cardigan I made for when the baby was a brand new baby. So that cardigan definitely doesn't fit anymore. And I really miss the days where you could just get an entire garment out of a single 100-gram skein of yarn. That was fantastic. And then have enough left over for a headband. So this one is slightly skinnier than the previous one I made, but I really enjoy it. I like the green because it goes with outfits that my other slightly pinky one doesn't. I'm also tempted to make a grey one. Just have all the headbands in all the colours for all the outfits, while my hair is still doing this, because tempted to go for the full, like, get some gel in there and do the flicks that you had in, like, 2002. Maybe a little bit later. Early 2000s. Get some, like, chunky highlights in there. I won't be doing any of those things, don't worry. Sorry, I will show you the next thing. The next thing is exciting, and I'm very, very pleased with it. And I've had to go and steal it from my husband. It's the jumper for Ben! I'm trying to think what sort of shape this was in last time I showed you. I think I had separated, maybe, for the body and sleeves. Not really sure. Now it is finished. And he has been wearing it, and I'm very, very pleased with it. It's just quite nice, isn't it? I'll put it on, and I'll immediately get very, very warm. And, you know, it's 2 to 3 sizes too big for me, so it'll be not as intended. But it just shows sort of how the yoke and everything sits on a human body. So yes, you can see, rather more ease than I would wear, but actually, it's kind of cute. So yes, jumper for Ben. Very, very pleased with it. It is now, I need to finish up final tweaks to the pattern, then I will be sending it off for editing. I think I will be working with a new editor because my lovely tech editor is now running a mill and things, and that takes up a lot of time. There we go. So, yes, it will be tech edited, and then I will open up test knitting, and I think I'm going to run the test knit over most of the summer. And so there will be plenty of time to do it. I'm going to be prioritising test knitters who want to use Mendip DK, which is the yarn that I knitted this in, which is my hand-dyed yarn. and I just want to be able to show off as many different colour combinations as possible, because I've specifically designed it so that you can have fun putting together different colours. And to that end, I think when I get a bit of time, I'm going to draw... I thought I'd got all the ends. I'm going to draw a colouring sheet with the yoke pattern and everything on it, so that you can colour in the colours that you are in the shades you are considering for a version of your own, and you can sort of print off as many as you'd like, or you know, if you do digital colouring, do it on the digital device of your choice. And yeah, so you can experiment with colours without having to get loads of yarn and swatch and everything. And it's just a way of trying out different combinations before you actually start knitting. And hopefully that will be a nice way to be able to visualise, because I realise some people struggle to visualise, well, anything. I tend not to have too much trouble visualising things, probably why I'm a designer. It's something that I enjoy and find quite easy, but I realise that once you start getting lots of colours together, it can be really hard to imagine how they're going to interact together, and which parts of the design, because you can, I think I mentioned last time, you can mess around with the colour placement and everything in this design, and I think it'll be really cool and fun. So yes, that one will be going out for testing at some point, probably in a few weeks' time, not really sure yet, and I'll work out testing schedules and then when I'm planning on publishing it. At the moment, I think it's likely to be towards the end of summer, so people can start getting it on their needles in time for sweater weather, which we're only just coming to the end of now, so yay. Yeah, so those are the things I finished, and now I'm going to show you something that I am not going to finish. Now, if you've been around for a while, you might recognise this project. It has been going on for a very long time. I'm going to get rid of the balls of yarn I haven't started yet. Now this, I still occasionally get questions on, and it's just time I did something about it. So this is a pair of leggings that I started knitting in February 2020, when I was going on a trip to Norway, and I haven't worked on them in a long time, partially because I wasn't enjoying the knitting, because I was working at quite a tight gauge, because I wanted them to be fairly durable. I was holding yarns double and working the legs two at a time, and just lots and lots of factors going into making it just not a very enjoyable knit. And so I'm going to frog it, because I have thought about working on them a few times recently, and I'm not excited to knit them, and I'm also actually not that excited at the idea of wearing them, which is the main thing that motivates me through a project. So they're gonna go. It's interesting, because it's just a case of my taste changing a bit, and I'm thinking about when I was hoping to wear these was, you know, either when it's chilly and I'm outside and wanting them for layering up, or just for lazing around the house. But I've found that, especially for lazing around the house, I'm enjoying things that are looser and sort of less restrictive. And so the idea of a knitted pair of trousers, like some tracksuit bottoms or something with cables, I love. I think that would be great and so comfy. Unlikely to knit that because it's like knitting a gigantic pair of sleeves, and why? What? No. And so I'm just going to start frogging these on here. And it's going to be a bit of a pain because, in fact, I'm going to do one leg and then the other. I'm not going to try and unravel them two at a time. And yeah, I'm going to wind the yarn into separate balls as well because I've got them wound up together. So I was holding grey yarn, which is actually yarn I plied myself. I've got a load of this on cone as a single. It's a weaving yarn. In fact, it's actually the wool yarn that is in the fabric of my skirt that I wove, which is also, I used the wool for the warp, dyed red, and then a kind of terracotta-y orange as the weft in Rami fibre. So I was holding the yarns together for the leggings. So it's this grey plus various colours of Rama phenol yarn, which I'll be able to reclaim and use for something. So I'm just going to chat for a little while whilst messing with some yarn, which I hope you won't mind. So yeah, my taste has just changed a bit since I started making these, and if I were very almost finished, I would probably just carry on and get them finished and then, you know, maybe gift them to someone with similarly long and ridiculously skinny legs as me. But there's still a way to go, and I know that I'm not going to enjoy knitting them, and I have many other things that I will enjoy knitting on, and life is too short to spend on knitting you don't enjoy when there isn't really a reason for it. Because sometimes projects turn out to be just not that much fun, but they can be worth it. This one I don't think will be. So I will be reclaiming the yarn, and it's in colours I quite like, but I'm not super keen on the little gradient I've got going on. I'm going from dark grey at the top down to a sort of burgundy and then a brick reddy orange. They're all colours that I like, and I think they do work well together. But just, yeah, I think I'm not super keen on gradients in my knitting. So we'll just wind them up into little balls, and it will be slow, but something I can do without thinking at all, because I've just finished a few different things. I have some other projects that I'm about to get on the needles. I have a couple of commissions for magazines that I'm currently in the process of doing all the spreadsheets and everything for, working out all the maths. And once I've got those done, I will then be casting on those. One is a cardigan and one's an accessory. And those are my obligation knits, the things that I am contractually obliged to do. And I'm actually very excited about both of them. I think they are super fun, nice designs. They're publications I'm pleased to be working with. And yeah, I mean, you won't see... Well, no, one of them I will be able to share once. I think I'll be able to show little bits here and there. But the other one you won't see any of until next year. And then I also need to cast on a hat, which is a design I've done. I started making it. I've got everything worked out. I've got the pattern, not quite written, but almost there. But it is... oh lordy. I'm getting both sides tangled up now. This was always going to happen. Yes, the hat. I started making, realised it was going to turn out far too small, so I've fiddled with the numbers a little bit and need to start working on that one again. But I find casting on something a bit more of a mental hurdle than just picking something up that I'm already working on. Like, it's exciting, and I really, really enjoy starting things, and I'm having to resist casting on, like, 4 different things. Because once I've done this, I will technically only have 1 work in progress, which is mad. I usually have about 5. It's been fewer of late, just because I've been slightly more focused. But yeah, so I do like, although, you know, it's disappointing when a project doesn't quite work out like this, but it's in a way quite refreshing to make space on the needles, even though, you know, I didn't actually have it on needles, I had it on a cable with end caps. But to just make a little bit of mental space for something that you no longer have to make excuses for. Like, I have to be... I think, knowing that there are people out there with sort of 50 works in progress, I think there must be people who are fine with having something in progress that they actually never really expect to finish. And I have to, at least a tiny bit of me has to believe that I am going to finish that thing. And that's why I tend to, once I get to about 5 works in progress, I usually implement a one-off, one-on policy. So I have to finish something or frog it before I can start another thing. And this isn't that, because I could quite happily start a few more things at the moment. But I just want to get it gone now, because yeah, just refreshing. A bit of spring cleaning of the works in progress pile. And the other thing that I have in progress now is a scrappy red jacket in colours quite similar to my skirt, which I do intend to finish and will enjoy making. With that one, the reason it's lagging a little bit is because it involves constant decision making, which is a slightly silly thing. But because I'm working with yarn leftover and lots of different yarns and alternating them, I don't have a set pattern to which I'm following, to which I'm working with the yarns. And so every other row I need to decide which yarn I'm going to use next. And although that is a very, very small mental task, it just makes things slightly less relaxing than they could be. I might try my friend Kat's method of assigning colours or yarns to a die and rolling a die every time I need to decide which colour to use next. I might do that, because then it would take the decision out of my hands and I can just get on with it. And it is lashing it down with rain now. It's definitely beginning to feel springy. there are lots of things out in the garden. I'll put some little bits at the end of spring things we've got growing in the garden. And it's actually something I wanted to ask. Would you be interested in a little look at the garden? I know a few people have asked, and I used to show the garden at the old house quite regularly. That was sort of because we'd been working on it for quite a while. But now we've been here almost a year. But we've done some things with the garden. We've started making some improvements, addressing the weed situation because everything was getting overgrown by grass. There's still ground elder everywhere. But it's clearly a garden that at some point someone has loved, which is nice, even though that someone had very, very different taste in plants to me. And so we're gradually going and taking out things that we just don't like and rehoming them, but only doing that where we have something to replace it. I'm not, like, there are things that I'm really not keen on, but at the moment they're serving a purpose in the garden. There's a hydrangea that at the moment looks lovely because it's got all dried out flower heads from last year, which I really enjoy. But in the summer when it's flowering, it's the most aggressive pink you ever did see, and it's just really not my colour. But that seems to have been the favourite colour of the person who planted this garden. But at the moment it's staying because I don't have something else to go in the spot where it is, and it's better to have a plant that's doing what it's meant to, even though that's not to my taste, than to just have an empty space. But once I've got more things growing and I have things to replace things, then I can dig things up and rehome them. I have family members who have different taste in plants to me, and so I can pass things on, and I'm sure there will be people in the village who would also gratefully receive plants. So I know they won't go to waste. But it's just a case of doing things as we have time, and I'm very looking forward to the clocks changing, not only just because, yay, springtime, but also because it will mean that we actually get some gardening time after the child has gone to bed, and it'll still be light, which is exciting. I miss that. It's something I used to regularly garden after work. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And yeah, so let me know if you're into the garden content. Next month, I think more things will be happening, hopefully. The weather will be slightly less disgusting, and I'll be able to get out and spend some time showing you what's out there, if that's something that would be of interest. And I can talk a little bit about our plans for things. Progress. We've unravelled maybe like 2 inches of leg. That's cool. Got 2 little balls. Making progress. So yes, this will be something that I just do. It's actually probably something I can do whilst watching the child. And those activities are few and far between because he wants to get involved in everything, and often that means destroying things. But when the goal is destruction, you can be helpful. Might give that a go. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it there. I will carry on unravelling just a little bit because it's just so pleasantly therapeutic. I find that once you've accepted that you're going to unravel something, it's just quite nice. All that time that you spent making the thing. You can just watch it unfurling in front of you. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. It's been nice to catch up with you a little bit. I'm sure I will have quite a few more things to show you next time. If you want to keep up with me between episodes, you can always catch me on Instagram. You can sign up to my newsletter, which is where announcements and things happen. And you can join me on Patreon if you want some extra videos and Zoom calls and Discord chat and discounts and all kinds of nice goodness. And I'll catch you next time. Thank you for joining me. Bye bye.